Welcome to the Belfry Hockey Podcast. My name is Daryl Belfry, and this is season 3 of the Belfry Hockey Podcast, and this is going to be episode 15, Shaping Moments. So, what I wanted to do is have my last episode of this series be something more of an introspective and be able to share some of these, like what I would call like left or right turns in the road of my career that were really impactful. They were like moments that changed everything. Like I thought about things different from that moment forward. And I think everybody in every walk of life has those moments where, like, once you've had that happen, nothing's the same ever since. It takes you in a whole different direction. And I don't think those things happen by coincidence. I think as you move you along, you end up with these, and then it's just up to you to figure out how impactful that those are going to be in your life. And I was always very mindful that I knew that there was going to be these moments that were going to happen, and so I was always on the lookout for them. And these are, I guess, 10 or 11 moments that I had with players that really dramatically shaped the way that I thought from that moment forward. So, without any further ado, let's get started. So, the first player I want to talk about is Patrick Kane. Obviously, he's the longest, the longest client I've ever had. I started with him when he was very young, and there were millions of moments with him. And so to pick one has been a bit of a challenge, but I think this one was one of the more impactful ones. So I'm going to start with this one. So basically, when he had turned, this is a moment where he had turned pro and he was playing in the NHL. And during the course of that those off seasons, there was a lot of like building of something new, like creating new aspects to his game. And so, we'd researched what we wanted to do. We got out there. I had a good game plan of how I wanted to attack it, and we would get into it. And a lot of the movements, particularly early on in the development sessions, were highly specific movements. We were really trying to change a movement pattern. So we would get started, and as we would get into it, he would be going through the movements, and he would just be standing there, and he had this thing where he would be like retelling what it was that I want. Okay, so you want me to go here? You want me to do this? You want me to do that? And he would have his hand. You could see he was almost like acting it out, but he was just standing still. And then to get started, he would then go the opposite direction, and then he would do like two or three like skills. Like when I say skills, I mean like maybe a fake, maybe a self pass off the boards. Maybe he would go down the wall and then like do like a turn, like all these like random movements that had nothing to do with what we were doing. Like normally anybody else, you say go and they go. They just start going towards what you're prescribing them to do. This guy's going in the complete opposite direction, and he's doing all these couple of skills, and then he would go and he would do it, and he did it, for quite a while, and then finally I said to him like, okay, so like what are we doing here? And he's like, well, I'm trying to connect it so that it just doesn't feel like a drill. Like I want it to feel like a game. Like I'm trying to, imagine myself in it. And I was like, oh, like I'm thinking we're just repping this out. But in his mind, it's going to go faster if he can feel it like way it's going to feel in a game. So in a game, you don't just do the movement. You have things that are going to happen before and things that are going to happen after. So that's what when he said that and he started doing it, and then I started playing with it, and then we started adding all kinds of different things. That's what started me on the path of stacking, stacking things together, having one skill then blend into another skill and shouldering skills. And so I started to run with it. And he constantly would do it. And every time I have an ice time with him, he's always like adding something different and personalizing it in some way. And that was a major, major turning point for me because I started to view skills more from that like two or three parts. Like, how do you lead yourself in to the skill, and then how do you lead yourself out, and then creating isolation in certain pieces, building it up, and then sticking it back in, and then creating a lot of variability in the entrance and the exit. All that came from that moment. That's what started me along that path. I called it pre-rep movement, and he was the author of that. Which kind of brings me to the next one, which was a moment I had with Kyle Okposo. And Kyle Okposo, for those of you who don't know, is a absolute freak of an athlete. Like he could play. When they say guys could play any sport, that's Kyle Okposo. His level of athleticism is one of the highest of anybody I've ever worked with. He has an insane ability to acquire skills. His power and ability to produce power is through the roof, and a nicer person you will never meet. But that's a whole other discussion. So Kyle, very similar. I would have him, working on something, and I was talking to him. Okay, so I want you to do this. When you get here, this is the skill. Don't forget this. Remember that. And describing the movements, and like I would finish talking to him, and then he would do like a dry run, like just walk through. He would just go. He would just start moving, and then he would have the move. Okay, so it would be like this, and he'd be asking me while he's doing his walkthrough, like, is this what you want? And if I say, well, yeah, that, or no, then he would go back and back it up just like a step and go, well, is it like this? Yeah, no, like that. Okay, move your elbow here. Yep, do that. Okay, great. And he would get every correction out of the way in that walkthrough before he did a single rep. And I'd never seen that before. I was like, what is this? And he would do it over everything that was like a new pattern, new movement where we were trying to change something. He would do the same thing every time, and it was he would get all the corrections done through this what I had termed a feel through, and uh, players that I saw afterwards, I saw that happen more and more because once you see it, then you start to notice it, right? It's like driving down a highway and you say, hey, there's a red car, and then next thing you know, all you see is that same red car over and over again, right? That's what happens once you're drawn to that thing, that it comes up. So now you remember the Pat Kane story, right? He would be standing in one place and he'd kind of be like moving his arms or just like slightly moving or whatever. He's doing a feel through, but it was a mental feel through. He was mentally going through what he was doing. And he could imagine himself, it's a major part of his learning was the imagination part. There was a visualization, and he had to be able to visualize it and then see himself doing it. That was a big part of how he would learn. Kyle, his approach was through the actual feel of the movement. Like he was actually going through it at a very slow pace, getting all the corrections out of the way, and then that's how he would start. And it was fascinating. And then once I saw that, I started to notice it with more people, and I started to provide more space for them to do it. And I would start asking questions, and I would create dialogue during this because I wanted to see kind of more and more about how they were thinking. I remembered the Kane stuff that I had learned a few years earlier, and then I was trying to tie this whole thing together. There's mental rehearsals, and then there's these physical rehearsals. And some players might want to do both, and some players are not familiar with feel throughs. So it was a couple of years after that, I had a junior player, He and one of his agent had called me and said, "Hey, I'd like you to work with this player." The player was a junior player playing in the OHL, so he comes out to train with me, and he was so, I don't know if it was like he was nervous or whatever, but he was so eager. Like I would say go, like I would tell him what I wanted to do. I say go, he's gone. He would just try to do it as fast as he could, and I was like, okay, you're not going to learn anything like that. Like you have to actually, we're trying to change. You need to be able to feel like, and you're going so fast, you're never going to be able to feel that. So I was like, I'm like teaching him, and I didn't know like is he like more like Kane where he would need to visualize it, or is he more like Kyle where he would really need to feel it. But I wanted to create like these awarenesses, physical and mental awarenesses of the types of things that we were trying to change. And so I'm like during the sessions I'm like getting him to slow down, let's go through it, let's get a feel for the differences and change. Let's wreck it. Oh, and he was one that was like, oh, that feels terrible. Yeah, that's what we want. At least you're feeling things different. Like, because it took a while to actually like be cognizant of his actual feel. So I really learned then that like there are a lot of players that don't like they don't feel or they don't like that feeling. They just want to do things so much more unconsciously, but you can't change anything like that. You have to bubble it up to the surface. You can manipulate it then and then stick it back into the self-conscious. That's the essence of player development in sport. So that was huge. But if I hadn't understood those other things, it would be harder for me to really make an impact with that particular player. And so and then that became something else I was on the lookout for, which is because the only thing I knew to that point was learning styles. The way it's like, the way it's explained is like, well, some people are visual and some people, they need to hear it, and then other people they just need to do it. And yes, but no, like it's all of that, right? But at the same time, it's the rehearsals and the ability to associate, feel, and feel yourself in movement. That's a major part of changing any type of move. We are in the movement business, and so changing movement is a major part of it. You're not going to get anywhere unless the player can feel where they are in space and in movement. So fascinating. Which brings me to my next one, which was Nathan Horton. So Nathan Horton was like my first guy. He was the first one. He's 3 years older than Patrick Kane, and I had worked with him, and he was like my first big guy, and we kind of knew like early on like this guy's gonna play. Like he was, when I say he could play any other sport, like when I talk about Kyle Okposo, the way I talk about him, Nathan was very similar. He if not even more, like he was an absolute freak athlete, and he could acquire skills so fast. And I was in the infancy part of my own personal development, so I wasn't all that sophisticated, so like I would try to give him a skill and he would learn it like that, like literally instantly. I'm like, I remember having to come to the rink with like 25 to 30 ideas because I was worried like that he was going to run through them. I remember coming to the rink and I'm like, okay, we have 50 minutes. I'm going to bring 10 things. That's 5 minutes a thing. I had it figured out how many reps it would be. And I'm like, okay, go. And we were done all those 10 things in like the first 15, 20 minutes. It was done. It was already, like, he could already do it all. Like, it was nowhere near at the edge of his ability. And I'm like, okay, like, clearly I'm either underprepared, which at first I'm like, okay, I need more volume of stuff, and I'm throwing different stuff. Okay, you got that? Okay, grab this. Okay, grab that. Which he loved because he was that kind of kid. Like he loved learning something new and different ideas, and he loved, like, he was a very much like a challenge guy. Like the idea was to appeal to his like, you can't do that, or I got something for you, and then he'd be like, oh yeah, and then he would be laser focused and pick it up. And I remember this one skill that we would do. I used to do a lot of overspeed work. I had read the book from Jack Blatherwick right near this time that I was working with Nathan. And Nathan was probably like, I don't know, like 10 or 11 years old, and we would do these overspeed drills. So we'd have the whole group out there. There's like 20 players. Divide them up into four corners. There's five kids in a line, and we would do. I would send the whole line at the same time, and you would do one circle as fast as you could humanly do it, and then you'd be over to the other circle. It was basically like a ton of figure eights, and you would add different types of skills at different times, right? So, one day Nathan he couldn't come to his regularly scheduled time with his peers, and so he asked, "Can I come like earlier to the earlier session?" And I'm like, "Yeah, but those kids are like a couple years younger. Like he was like to know Nathan at that time, like Nathan at like 11 years old, there were like 15-year-olds that couldn't play with him. Like at 12 years old, he was playing like junior B hockey, which that's when junior B was actually like really good, and there were players going to the OHL from there. He's like there at like at 13 years old. He's in that league. He's 5'11", 6 foot, 170 pounds, and he's like a star in the league at 13 years old. Like this is the type of player that he was. Just to give context, like he was not at 11 years old. He was better than most every 15-year-old you could put on the ice in our area, pretty much. Like it was crazy how good he was. So one of the things that he would do, there was one day we were doing that overspeed stuff, and he's flying around, and all of a sudden, like the puck kind of flips up on his edge, and Nathan, like while he's crossing his feet, he picks it up, like not like today. You know how like today they put pressure on it, and then they can pick it up or like scoop it. Like it's not like it was today. Like it was just like this accidental thing that like as he was handling the puck, it had flipped up on its edge, and obviously like his stick kind of flipped over, and then the puck was sitting flat on his stick, and he could feel that, and all of a sudden he just picks it up, and he skates the rest of the pattern with the stick, with the puck on his stick, like in the air, and then like throws it in the net like it's lacrosse puck. And I'm like, okay, what the hell was that? Like he never did it again. Like we'd never seen that before. But that was like he had these like abilities where all of a sudden like he would just go with whatever was going on, and he could just adapt and adjust. And he just had that ability to acquire skills. And so for me at that stage in my development, it was phenomenal because I had a player who was insatiable. He was so much better than me. Like his level at 11 years old far exceeded my understanding of skill, and so I was forced to like learn more and more and more because I wanted to keep him, and keep him. I had to keep him engaged and keep him interested, and so I would just keep adding these things. I mean, there were times like, again, like the puck is bouncing, right? The puck is bouncing, and he would like use his foot, like kick it over to his stick on the other side, like as he's moving. So as he's moving, the puck kind of flips or bounces. He kicks it over to his stick on this side, like crazy stuff like you've never seen. But a lot of like they were reactions. A lot of it was just like there was environmental reactions that he would just go with, and most of the kids there, like if anything like anything like that happened, they would like stop. They would stop them, not necessarily come to a complete stop, but they would stop their movement to settle the puck, and then they would continue on. He would go with it. He would just go with stuff and see kind of where it took him. And that level of confidence and just a level of like curiosity he had, like I said, I was so in on it. I was trying all kinds of different things, and I thought years later, like I wished I would have had him, like so much earlier in my career, or like so much had him later in my career. I would have loved to have had that one as a do-over. I wish he wasn't like that part of that first group because I would have known more. But It doesn't work like that. Like, there was a reason why I had him first, because he just taught me so much. Like, it was like a fast forwarding process of learning how to acquire skill. And a lot of it I couldn't even label. I didn't really know what was going on, but I just like implicitly just watch what was happening, and was videotaping stuff, and I could kind of see where he was, like where he was and what he was doing. And I had my mentor Bud, and we would be talking about him all the time. But it was literally like so much of it, what he was doing was you were in awe of all the time. Like, and everybody, all the players, anybody who was on the ice was, yeah, it was quite something. Like, he was impressive to spend any time with. It was a true gift to spend time with him, and he taught me so much. And most of it I had no idea. Like, it was years later I could kind of think about some of this stuff. But what I also remember about him was he was also a feel based kid. Like, he did not like going first. He liked to watch it, and then he wanted to do some like rehearsals. And so one of the things that he would do, which is a great story, was when he was young, we would do all these like overspeed stuff, and I wanted him to go first, and he hated going first. And I would like make him go first, and then he would be like, "No, I don't want to go first." We'd have this like battle, right? And one day he goes to the back of the line, and so we go, like, you do one circle, the other circle, and then now you come back to your line. He starts at the back of the line. These are all kids his age, and he starts last. So let's say he's in the sixth position. So last is sixth. He goes around the first round, and then he's third now. He's passed two guys, and then the next time he goes, he passes like two, three more. Now he's like first or second. Once he gets to first, he would go back to the back of the line and do it again. And I had no idea. Like, I'm watching this whole thing, and I'm like, what is going on here? And then I start watching him in the movements. So most of it, it's a sprint. So you can envision there's six kids in the line. We go, okay, go around this circle, then go around the other circle, figure eight. All of you go at the same time. Well, they're all at different abilities. Some of the kids are like losing their puck. Some kids, like, crossing over is a bit of a challenge. That's not really their strengths. Some pucks, like, they got to stop. All of a sudden, they got to move this way. He was there, and he's crossing his feet, but all of a sudden, he's got to react to, like, the kid in front of him, and he's, like, moving over this way, or he's, like, deking him out. There was one time, like, I remember him putting the puck, like, through the guy's, like, through the guy's triangle from behind, like, the guy's in front of him. He's putting the puck through his triangle and ending up on the other side. I'm like, okay, what is going on? This is crazy. Like, and I remember saying, how many skills is this guy going to use? And he's doing it so fast, and he's passing all these people. It was insane. It was insane to see. And he's doing that on his own because he's looking for more challenge. And like I said, he was just that guy that he could do everything. Everything came pretty easy to him, and he was always just looking for that different type of challenge. And to see him do that stuff, like, to this day, I talk about it, it's like awe-inspiring. Like, it was I've never seen it since. So that's how good that guy was. Which kind of brings me to my next guy. So the next guy is John Tavares. So I spoke about John Tavares in the last segment, and we talked about that story. Now I want to talk about emphasis on detail. So when I first started with John, he was in his first year in the NHL playing for the Islanders. And when I saw him that summer, and I started working with him, he was so detailed in how the process, like, trying to understand the process and be a participant in the process, and the level of detail and the questions. And there were just many times I had to just say, like, I don't know. He would ask me a question that I just didn't have the answer for. So I learned with him, because up until that point, like, I was trying so hard to be like an expert, like become that guy, and I remember just not a lot of players would ever ask me a lot of questions, and when I started working with him, he had a lot of questions. Patrick was different because it was kind of like brother. I was like a big brother to him, more so than student teacher, because I'd known him since he was really young, 8 years old. So, and I was a kid working with a kid. So it was that kind of how the relationship was with with John. It was different. I'm not. This is not a brother relationship. Like it's clearly client and student teacher relationship. And so all of a sudden there's dialogue, and he's asking me questions and like really smart questions that I'm like, okay, like genuinely, I do not have the answer for. And I remember being so scared to say that. Like I remember being there, and I'm like, there's no way, there's nothing I can say to this question. He's gonna know that I don't know, so I just may as well say, because if I try to say something, and he's gonna just look at me, and I'm just gonna lose all credibility. So I'm gonna lose all credibility anyways. I may as well do it with the integrity of just saying like I don't know, and but I'm gonna try to find out. And I remember the impact I feel like that had on our relationship with him. It felt like there was a real genuineness, and it kind of broke down quite a few barriers with the vulnerability of just saying, "Hey, I don't know," and it just became a lot more like lock and step. And I always appreciated that about him, not like holding that against me, like, "Hey, I'm coming to you, I'm paying you to work with me, and you're supposed to have all these answers, but you don't have this answer." Like he could have very easily been like, he was like what 19 years old, 18 years old. He would have been very easily been like, "What are we doing with this guy?" But it wasn't like that at all, and it just became a lot more collaborative in our relationship ever since. And I was much more comfortable not only with him but with every player thereafter by having that. If I didn't know, which there's lots that I don't know, I'm very upfront about it and say like I don't pretend to know. I don't have that answer. Um, these are some of my thoughts I might have on it, but I don't know for sure. Like sometimes I would say like I don't know that answer specifically, but here's if you were holding my feet to the fire, this is the answer I would give. These are some of the ideas, and then it would spark a good discussion. So that was a big one with John Tavares. Next guy is Lars Eller. So Lars Eller was a really interesting player for me, and I learned a ton working with Lars Eller. He is a fascinating person to talk to, and extremely thoughtful. Like he really is analytical, and he has a high level of intelligence when he's processing everything. And one of the things that really irritated him when he was on the ice was a lack of symmetry. He did not like it that he had a strong side and a weak side. So like one of the first things that we were working on was his turning and trying to become more efficient in the turn and come faster and carry more speed into the turn, carry speed out of it, maybe build speed in turns, all of that. And of course, one side was significantly better than the other, of course, as it naturally would. There's always that that way. It's always like that you're going to have that. And he just did not like it. He would always be like upset that this one side just wasn't what he wasn't picking it up as fast. And I remember in working with him, he'd be like, "Well, that's my weak side." So what I started doing was doing that side first. I would do a lot of work on his off, like the side that he wasn't as comfortable with. I would do a lot of that work first, and then we would work out a lot of the kinks in it at a where he was uncomfortable. So he was uncomfortable. He had already expected that this was going to be harder on that side. So I'd start on that side. And then when we went to his good side, of course, pick it up right away. But I felt like we were making a lot of the corrections on one side because he was so like adamant that he wanted to have this sense and feel of symmetry. And so I started to carry that forward, and I use that even to this day. Whenever I'm in a situation, I try to work on a player's weak side first, build out all the corrections because there's an expectation that it's going to be difficult. And then when we go to the good side, we hit it right away. We don't need quite as many reps, and that's good. But if you do it the opposite way, you start off on the good side, you do it, they do it really easy. Now you go to the off side, it can get really frustrating for them. And I learned that from Lars because he was so, you could tell it just bothered him that, he just did not like having a weak side. Hey, he would say all the time, I'm going to have to turn this way. I want to do it well. I want to do it right. And I always had to keep that in mind with him. It was really quite something. So the next one I have is Nathan MacKinnon. So I have kind of two stories with him. The one part about Nathan is he is extremely intense. Like before you go on the ice with him, he's very calm. Hey, how's it going? Just very normal. There's something about the second he puts that helmet on, it's totally different. Like he's working, and he has a high level of expectation not only for himself but for you. And I'd never been on the ice with a guy who was that demanding of himself and of me. The only other guy I'd ever spent time with that was like that was Paul Gostad. But Paul Gostad was much more, he was so hard on himself. I'd never seen anybody that hard on himself ever before I met Paul Gostad. And thank God I met Paul Gostad before I worked with Nathan MacKinnon, because I wouldn't have been anywhere near prepared to work with anyone like Nathan had I not worked with Paul. Paul was he was so intense and had a high expectation of himself and wanted to get things right away. And when it didn't happen, like he would lose it on himself, angry, snapping sticks, helicoptering them, like just pissed off. And I was like, oh my God, like it was like I'd never seen that before. Usually my sessions are very like calm, subdued. This guy comes out and it's right up to like level 11. And I'm like, I just wasn't used to that. And but he was not ever demanding of me. It was always on himself. So he wasn't like yelling at me, or he wasn't any. He placed no blame onto me. It was always on himself. Now Nathan was not placing it. Would never place any blame on me. Would never yell at me or anything like that. It wasn't like that. It was just the intensity. You could cut it with a knife, and you felt a responsibility to be better. Like he just has that effect where when you're on the ice, because he is so intense in his process and demanding of himself to get better and try different things and learn skills quickly, and then he has like it wherever you think the skill is going to go, he's trying to go 10 times past that all the time. So you got to be prepared. Like he is driven and really working towards it. Not to say other players aren't, but there's just this intensity. There's this, you can feel it. And a lot of times you can literally cut it with a knife. And so for me, I felt you feel this like obligation to kind of meet him, not with that intensity, but with better information. Like you got to be on. You got to be on fire. So I'm like, going on an ice session with Nathan was like going on an ice set, like being on an ice like 10 times. You felt like you'd done 10 rounds with Mike Tyson when you got off, because it was just so intense and it took a lot out of it, because the level of focus, because if he's going to be this intense and this demanding of himself, I better bring it my best. Like I got to be my best when I'm out here. I got to have the right answer. I got to be on it. I can't miss a detail. That's what I mean. And I started to think about it afterwards, after working with him. I remember coming home, my wife's like, what is wrong with you? I'm like, I am exhausted. I'm exhausted. And I remember my daughter coming out with me, and Ella was like, oh my God, Dad, like I've never seen anything like that. And I was like, yeah, that's like another level. And like you see how he drives himself to be the best. Like, and now he is. Like for my money this year, he's the best player in the NHL. And that's why everything just has to be on all the time. He's relentless. And like I said, like that forces you to match. And I'd never had that before. But I thought about it afterwards, and I was like, this feeling you have of being like on it and being perfect and really being dialed in and watching every single rep and being critical, like, doesn't every player deserve that level of intensity from you? Like, shouldn't you have that, have that, bring that level of energy to every session? Like, you need to be on it, like, you need to be dialed. And I remember thinking, like, yeah, maybe it won't be like I'm not going to get this matched energy, and it's not going to be like he's forcing me. Like, Nate, there's no way to be on the ice with him and not elevate to your best. You have to. He's going to force you. He's going to force you. And I remember thinking, like, why do I need to be forced? Like, why do I need to be forced? Why don't this guy is showing me something here. Like, I need to be on it, and I need to bring better energy to each of my sessions. And when I mean energy, like, it's not like I'm mailing it in. It's that, like, putting pressure on myself to be perfectly dialed and making sure that I'm on it, and I'm bringing, like, my best, and I'm operating at my best. He was bringing that out of me. Why do I need someone to bring that out of me? I should be bringing that on my own. And Nathan taught me that, and I'll be forever indebted to him for doing that for me. The next guy is Sidney Crosby. Now, the first time I met Sidney Crosby, I flew to New York to skate with him, and I remember being so excited in the days leading up to when I was gonna fly out. I'm like, yes, I'm gonna go. Like, he's the best player in the world, and I'm gonna have this opportunity to skate with him, and this is a privilege, and I'm so excited. And to some degree, I thought that this, like, I had earned the right to get to this level. Like, hey, this is your shot. You're gonna have a chance to work with the best player in the world. Like, this is what a privilege. And this validates all the work and, frankly, the shit you had to put up with to get to this spot, and all the things you had to overcome. Like, this is how I was justifying it when I get there. So I get to the airport, and I go on the plane. And I remember thinking on the plane, the complete opposite. You don't deserve to be here. What the hell are you even doing? Like, you don't belong on the ice with this guy. This guy's the best player in the world. What are you doing? Like, this is crazy. Like, this guy he is so far ahead of anything you've ever known. Like, I was totally talking myself out of the whole thing. Like, I remember landing and being like, this is a big mistake. Like, I don't know if I can do it. So I go there, I get there, the next day I'm skating. So the first time I'm going to meet him, we're on the ice. So I get on the ice, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, like, how am I gonna do this? Like, what am I gonna do here? I'm gonna pass the puck. There's kind of like sometimes with players, like, it's like a universal, like, hi, how are you, when you just get on the ice and you pass them the puck. Like, it can be like a bit of an icebreaker, right? And I knew that because I had done that a few times with other players. And so I thought, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I don't know what to say to him. Like, I'm petrified what to say. I'm so nervous, and I'm having so much imposter syndrome right now. Like, I don't even know if I'm going to make it. So I get dressed early, and I get on the ice, and I'm just skating around waiting for him to come out, which was like the worst thing I could have done because I'm like dying. So I get out there, and finally he comes on. And when I say finally, I mean he comes on at the appropriate time. Like, I'm out there early, and if I was out there 10 minutes early, it felt like 2 hours. Like, I was dying. He finally comes out there, where I see him, and I'm like, okay. So he goes, and they all bring out multiple sticks, and they go over, and they have all their, like, routines, and then they get out and they get started. And he grabs a puck or whatever and goes down and shoots the puck. And I'm ready with my puck. I'm standing there. I'm like, okay, I got it. So now he comes, and he kind of, like, gives me, like, a glance. Like, gives me a glance, and kind of, like, it wasn't really like a hello, but it was like a glance. Like, I gotta remember, I've never met him, never worked with him, never ever. So I'm the first time I'm meeting him is on the ice. So I pass the puck, and it hits him in the skates. Like I mean, like nowhere near him. Hits him in the skates. I'm like, seriously, the first puck you're gonna hit him in the skates? Now it's 100 times worse. Like now I'm like totally dying. So it was in that moment where you're like, it's literally fight or flight. Like I'm like, okay, you got to stop trying to, like, you got to stop thinking you don't belong. You're here now. So whether you belong or you don't belong, you're here. Make the best of it. That's I can remember making that mental shift. So instead of pass him another puck, I just skated over and I introduced myself. And then I'm like, let's go. Are you ready to go? He's like, yeah, give me a second. And he finished off his routine. And then we got started. And the lesson there for me, which has happened many times after, was you don't need to step out of your comfort zone and do things like I'm not an NHL player. I have no business passing pucks to guys. Like, yeah, once the relationship is built and we start passing around, they realize. I always make the joke, hey, like, you're not going to get a perfect pass in the NHL. It's so fast, and so good thing you're skating with me because I'll never give you a perfect pass. So it's perfect, right? And so that's my joke. Like that's how I explain away how bad my passes are. And I think what I had to do was, in the lesson that I learned at that time, and I remember it being very powerful for me, was don't try to be anybody you're not. You're here, whether you deserve to be here or whether you should be here or not. You are. So let's go. And I remember that shift, and with Sydney, he has a very tight circle, and once you find your way in the circle, you got to earn your way. He's not going to give it to you for nothing, and he's not unlike many other players that I've met, and they have to have that for a reason. And so it just became like, in order to earn the player's trust, I got to know what I'm doing. I have to be authentic, no bullshit, straight to the point, and really honor and be respectful of who they are and what they do, and match that intensity by bringing your best. That's really what I did. So I just remember going right into the conversation, asking him questions, getting into the movements, and then off we go. And I had video back then, which was incredibly valuable to be able to share back and forth my perspective. It gave me opportunity to talk to him and share what I was thinking, and then it gave him an idea to see, like, is this guy full of shit, or is he legit? And I just remember when I got off the ice thinking, if this is the only time I'm going to skate with him, like that's the only session I'm ever going to have, I feel like I did my best. And I remember the next day, and then we went to breakfast the next day, and I remember talking to him, and he was like furthering the discussion, and that became my confirmation that just be prepared, be ready to go, put your best foot forward, be honest and direct, and let the chips fall. And it worked with him, but oh my God, I remember just thinking, like, you do not belong here, and I'd never really felt like that before. But that, you're only going to get that one time. It's one first impression, and mine was a burger right into the skates. So if you can overcome that, I guess you can overcome anything. So thankfully that worked out. The last one that I wanted, well, I got two more we can do. Austin Matthews. Obviously, I've had a long, long relationship with him, and there's been millions of moments in his shooting that we could talk about for days. The one thing that really stands out, though, is the work we did with his takeaways. And it kind of was like, initially, I was using the takeaways as, like, when we talk about like Kane and those pre movements, I was at a level then when I was using a lot of that stuff, like, I was hiding the most important skill in the middle, and I'd have a way to get into it and a way to get out. And I remember we did a whole section on takeaways, all different types of ways of taking the puck. And all of a sudden that became a discussion and it became an obsession. And I began using it more and more and more. Once I saw how keen he was on it, he knew that that was an area that he wanted to get better at. So we were talking about it, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to bake it into what we're doing. And I'm going to have it at the beginning, I'm going to have it at the end, I'm going to have it at different spots in the development process. And it became like this theme where we would have practices where there was a takeaway some way somehow which would get us that would happen during the reps, and it was like literally every rep, so it's like 200-300 reps. He's doing one of these all the time, and the result of it is that he has become one of the best takeaway players in the National Hockey League. He's unbelievable at takeaways, and I think that what it was one discussion that he wanted to work on it, and then it became like this thing that we would do, and all of a sudden the reps started to pile up, and he was using it more and more and more. And I remember him going through that summer with him, and then the next year him going back to Toronto, and it was like every game takeaway, couple more in the offensive zone, scoring chances created, and it was an affirmation for me that this stacking was so critical. But it was Austin's ability during that time to really put that together, and I just remember that being such a major aspect of his development. Um, and so yeah, I think that's a good place to start, or a good place to finish for this season. Is It was a great season to talk about different aspects of player development and the real teaching aspects of it. So I was really happy that you came along with me for as long as you did, and we're excited to get season 4 going sometime in the summer.